boys and girls. So today, this video is going to be all about how to emotionally re-regulate somebody. So how did we emotionally dysregulate somebody? Well, we learned that if you watch that video, that your state transmits. So if I want to emotionally dysregulate another person who is in my company, I just need to go into states of rage or anger, display a little bit of violence maybe, and not necessarily to them. I could kick the table, slam doors, break objects in the house, destroy objects, and cause them to experience spikes in adrenaline. Emotional dysregulation, as you recall from the other video, is always this. So how do you emotionally re-regulate somebody who's been emotionally dysregulated? Same principles, same rules apply. So because your state transmits, that means that you need to be emotionally very constant. So the opposite of emotional dysregulation is emotional constancy. So you need to be in a state of intense and deep emotional constancy. It's hard to talk about this subject of re-regulating the HPA axis, the IPA axis, and of dealing with issues related to emotional dysregulation, complex PTSD and borderline personality disorder without touching on some of the principles of Buddhism, and particularly Zen Buddhism, meditation and meditative awareness. Because one of the things that Buddhism does, if you listen to Thich Nhat Hanh, for example, there's a little bit of a gap in the Western approach, which is that it focuses on where things go wrong. So a lot of mental health, if you go and look at like a syllabus on, say, abnormal psychology, which would describe personality disorders and the way in which things go wrong, there won't be much of a description of how things can go right, and there won't be much indication of how to increase mental health, where Zen Buddhism and Buddhism in general actually offers that. I'm not saying you have to give up your religious beliefs or change your religious beliefs. Go towards Buddhism in a non-religious way. Doesn't require any faith. At least in the way we're talking about it here. It's not faith-based, nothing to do with faith in higher powers. It's just about using the principles. So Thich Nhat Hanh, particularly, if you listen to, he did an audio book called Mindfulness, Anger and Psychotherapy, or something like that. Anger, Mindfulness and Psychotherapy. And I got that because I had anger management issues when I was in my 20s. And because I was interested in Zen, and I thought it was brilliant. But he spoke about increasing sanity, increasing mental health. So we need to have a model that permits that. So when you're seeking to emotionally re-regulate another person, you need to start with yourself, because your state transmits. So you need to become emotionally regulated. It's hard to do that if you're not self-aware. You do need to be quite self-aware, and you do need to have that objective and emotional constancy. Meditation will help you to do that. So if you're in a state of emotional constancy, if the waters on your pond are flat and calm, then it's easier, the other person can be drawn into your sanity. In the same way that you can be drawn into another person's insanity, they can be drawn into your sanity. And sometimes the only difference is who has the stronger frame of control, who has the stronger emotional force in that relationship, which is going to determine who wins that battle between chaos and order, between insanity and emotional dysregulation, the tsunami of emotions that can kick off, and emotional constancy and being clear and consistent. So you start with yourself. You need to engage in emotional constancy. That means when the other person, if somebody is emotionally dysregulated, they will attempt to provoke you, usually. Borderline personality disorder, whether it is malignant borderline or benign borderline, there will usually be elements of provocation there, reaction-seeking communication, because they want you to experience the internal chaos that they're experiencing. They want you to feel how they feel. This, I believe, is not done consciously. It's an unconscious drive to bring you into the chaos that they're experiencing. That could be quite tough if somebody's being very provocative with you, to not get drawn into their headspace, to not get drawn into their heart space in that chaos. You need to be quite strongly rooted and grounded in your own reality. Only meditation is really going to allow you to do that. If you're not big on meditation, another thing that you can do is engage in some really good, consistent, skillful state management practices. That means that you are doing all the basics, like taking care of your health, drinking plenty of water, eating healthy food, getting plenty of sleep, you know, engaging in positive internal dialogue, making sure your internal representations are lined up the right way, checking that you're doing the right things for the right reasons at the right time. That's state management. So if you're in a good, healthy state and you're on purpose, you know why you're doing what you're doing, then you will have more emotional constancy. Whenever you begin an interaction, if you start with the end in mind, like what is my objective here, that will help you to stay more emotionally constant, and to not get sucked into things that maybe you didn't want to get sucked into and you didn't consent to. So another way to emotionally re-regulate somebody is to, obviously, as I said, set the first boundary you need to set is a boundary with yourself. We talk a lot about boundary setting here, but you must be setting boundaries with yourself. So if you want to emotionally re-regulate another person, you need to emotionally re-regulate yourself first. You need to be emotionally constant, you need to have good, strong boundaries, boundaries with the other person, boundaries with your own feelings. You can't be triggered easily and be following every single fucking emotional impulse that fires off. You've got to stay emotionally consistent too. So following that emotional consistency, managing your state, and keeping yourself in a good space is all healthy stuff. When you are being provoked, you're going to have to not respond emotionally to that provocation. That can be tough. It requires detachment, it requires that you be grounded, but you also will need at times to reflect back what is going on. That means that your communication with the other person needs to be clear. This is very hard to do if you are coming from a weak position in a relationship where you are fawning. Do you remember the 4 responses to adverse traumatic conditions? Fight, flight, fawn, or freeze? If you're fawning to the other person and sort of begging them to not be emotionally dysregulated, that isn't going to work. So you need to be in a position where you're ready to take a loss. To use the samurai analogy, and keeping in line with the theme of Zen Buddhism, because Zen Buddhism was one of the favoured practices of the samurai, was that this idea of going into battle, having already experienced the loss, having already accepted the loss, having already accepted death. If you read the old samurai books like the Hagakure, for instance, it'll say the way of the samurai is the way of death. The way of the samurai isn't the way of winning. It's not about winning, it's about giving yourself in service to a cause. That's what samurai means. It means servant, it means to serve. So I'm not saying you need to die in order to emotionally re-regulate somebody, but you need to possibly die to the need to win an interaction. You need to die to the needs of, you know, fulfilling your agenda. If this is a relationship, say like in an intimate relationship, you have an agenda with the other person to emotionally re-regulate them so that you can benefit from that, so that you can be in a relationship with them, immediately things get weaker for you. To use more vernacular language, as Patrice O'Neill would say, you need to be willing to take an L, meaning you need to be willing in the interaction to take a loss, to accept a loss. If you go in fawning, being like, oh please, I hope that, you know, we can emotionally re-regulate you and stop you from, you know, going off the wall over nothing at all, that's not going to work. You need to come from a much stronger, much calmer position of, okay, well, I hope that you can let go of the insanity and come into my sanity, because that's what I want. I want you here with me. However, if you can't do that, I will not be brought into your insanity. That is an absolute boundary for me. Nothing is more important than me being centered and me being sane. So I will go this far with you, but no further. Whenever you're looking to work with other people, you do need to set these boundaries very clearly with yourself primarily, and then with the other person. So emotional re-regulation. You need to start with yourself first. Be regular, be emotionally constant, learn some good state management techniques, and learn good clear communication skills. You've got to ask directly for what you want. As an adult in an equal relationship, in a boundaried, healthy relationship, you need to ask directly for what you want. That means if you're on the one hand going to say, Richie, how can I emotionally re-regulate somebody in my relationship, but you still want to engage in passive-aggressive tactics and emotional manipulation to get what you want, you're kind of dismantling your own process. So be honest, be upfront, be direct. You've got to be willing to take an L. You've got to be willing to take a loss up front, and you do have to have that bravery and willingness to be vulnerable to actually state specifically what it is that you want. This is emotional dysregulation. This is emotional constancy. So you need to be here. You draw that person into, don't try and change them, because you'll just get sucked into the tsunami. The more you try and push them and try and change them, the more you get sucked in. You keep yourself constant and let them come into your reality. That's it for this subject. Thank you very much for your time and for your attention, and I will speak to you again soon.